Somalia's president backs down from extending his term by 2 years. But there's no clear path to elections. And the political crisis is triggering unrest in the capital. So, could the turmoil spark a new conflict? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Mohammed Jamjoom. When the Somali president's term expired in February, he tried to extend it by 2 years. But after facing opposition from within and outside the country, Mohamed Abdullahi Farmaajo is backing down. He's called for preparations to hold delayed elections. But Farmaajo and his opponents haven't been able to agree on how that vote should go ahead. Rival factions have been fighting in the capital, Mogadishu, and al-shabbab is seizing the opportunity to extend its grip. The armed group said it was behind a car bomb that killed at least 3 people outside the National Prisons Authority headquarters. It's feared the turmoil could lead to a new conflict, as Catherine Soy reports.
President Mohamed Abdullahi Farmaajo's address to the nation was tough, but at the same time provided an offer to unlock the political statement. He accused opposition leaders of politicizing the security forces, trying to cause chaos in Mogadishu and grab power, and some foreign countries of meddling in Somalia's internal affairs. But he also pedaled back on the controversial law passed by the lower house of parliament to extend his term in office by 2 years and have the Electoral Commission organize a popular vote within that time.
The federal government of Somalia has always believed and still sees dialogue, compromise, negotiation and the return to the discussion table as the only viable options, while honouring the September 17, 2020 agreement and the recommendations on the electoral model. I hereby call upon all of the signatories of the agreement to come together immediately for urgent discussions.
The September agreement says the country will hold an indirect election where clan elders choose members of parliament who in turn vote in a president. Talks between the government, leaders from the federal states and others have stalled, with the different sides accusing each other of derailing the process. Some analysts say the president's reversal of the decision to extend his term doesn't change the political contest over management of the election and the mistrust between politicians.
That there needs to be an arbiter or a negotiator between the different groups, an adjudicator who will tell who's wrong and who's right depending on the terms of earlier agreements. The UN has failed to do that, and so unless the African Union or somebody else can act as that mediator, I don't think they will come together to be able to agree on a path forward that will save the people of Mogadishu and the rest of the country from the crisis.
Tensions have been building for a while, and the crisis has drawn in the military and police force, which is said to be divided along political lines. Government and pro-opposition forces fought on Sunday in Mogadishu, and there are reports the opposition forces hold positions in several parts of the city. People have been fleeing their homes, fearing more conflict. But some are hopeful that the president's message will de-escalate tensions and politicians will find a middle ground to hold an election soon. Catherine Soy, Al Jazeera.
The unrest is the second bout of violence in Mogadishu over Farmaajo's bid to stay in power. And many fear the dispute will further divide Somalia's armed forces that are drawn from different clans. President Farmaajo belongs to one of the main clans, the Darad, while the majority of the military in the capital and most opposition leaders belong to the Hawiye. There's growing concern there could be a return of clan-based violence that followed the overthrow of Mohammed Siad Barre in 1991. The nation hasn't had a stable central government since then. A new internationally backed government was installed in 2012, but has struggled to assert control beyond Mogadishu. All right, let's bring in our guests in Mogadishu. Abdirahman Ibbi, a member of parliament and former deputy prime minister. In Toronto, Hodan, a development and humanitarian expert and co-founder of LeadNow, a Somali women's political pressure group. And also in Mogadishu, Jihan Abdullahi Hassan, a security analyst and former Director General of Somalia's Defense Ministry. A warm welcome to you all. Abdirahman, let me start with you today. Why did President Farmaajo finally give up on extending his term? Was it because of mounting pressure from both the international community and from domestic groups?
First, I will say to you, all of you, welcome and thank you very much for giving me this opportunity, at least, to welcome everybody and say what I think is actually to be told to Somali people. I also welcome my two sisters, whom I know very well, both of them. My president, actually, Mohamed Abdullahi Farmaajo, actually not being pressurized by anybody, but what I'm telling you is actually, according to the rules and regulations of the country, according to the constitution, it says actually when the president sees the situation of the country and listens actually the members of the federal stages and also the prime minister and consulted with the speaker of the parliament, that's when he actually decided to come back to the parliament and actually ask the parliament to come on Saturday, and he will actually inform us the current situation of the country. So it's not something that has been pressurized by the international community or the people, but well, according to the constitution of the country, you know it actually Article 1 of our constitution says, you know it very well, that Somalia is a federal and sovereign and a democratically funded and inclusive representation of the people, multi-party system, and social justice. So according to that actually article of the first constitution of our amendment, he is actually compelled to come back to the parliament and exactly tell us what he made with it, and at the same time to think of the current situation of the country and the well-being of his own people. So that's the kind of the president that's supposed to have the Somali people.
Jihan, there have been clashes in Mogadishu the past few days between forces loyal to President Farmaajo and units loyal to the opposition. How tense is the situation now, and what's the level of concern that fighting might get worse going forward?
Yes, there has been clashes, but now the situation is calm after the political, there's a political momentum right now. As mentioned by my colleague, there has been meetings between the Galmudug president, the Hirshabelle president, and that they nullified the extension. And it was welcomed by both the president and the prime minister. And now we see the prime minister going to meet the parliamentarians. There will be a session on Saturday. So that's sort of calm the tensions of violence, but unless there is a long-term political agreement and a way forward, this level of uncertainty can create a lot of challenges going forward. Over to you.
Hodan, Jihan was just talking about the potential for instability. Let me ask you, how much has the political stalemate in Somalia created uncertainty for the Somali people and also for the security forces?
I think Somalia is in a state right now where we've never been, politically and also from a security perspective. The current situation rising from the political stalemate, resulting in an illegal extension passed by Parliament, signed by the President. And I correct myself, it's not the Parliament, it's the lower house that signed it and passed it to the President to sign, has brought us to the brink of war, and also we've seen clashes between the two forces, as you've mentioned. At this point in 2021, for Somalia to be threatened and Mogadishu to be under fire is quite saddening for most of us. And to see hundreds of thousands of people flee the capital at this time in Ramadan has been also a horrifying scene to watch. I want to go back to the question that you asked earlier. Did the pressure, both the international community and at home, give rise to the president coming back and nullifying the illegal extension? Absolutely. There's been a mounting pressure both from the international community, internally, obviously with the insecurity that has been going on, but also within the government factions. The prime minister calling for ceasefire, the federal state members also rejecting the illegal extension. So I think all of those added together, all in all, has pushed the president to retract the illegal extension. If I can just add, the parliament itself has no mandate. The president has no mandate. So the extension to begin with was an illegal extension. But we are all hopeful that the current political negotiations will yield fruits and move the country towards an election and away from violence.
Abdirahman, President Farmaajo, as you mentioned in your previous answer, has said that he is going to appear before Parliament on Saturday in order to gain their endorsement for the electoral process that was agreed upon. He's talking about the September 17th agreement that had been cobbled together last year and then later fell apart. Do you believe that that can actually get done? Will the lower house of Parliament agree to this when he appears before them?
Yes, definitely, because in the first place, that resolution has been actually, met and organized by the Executive Council of Ministers, and they actually submitted to the Parliament. By the time they brought to the Parliament, we translated it into a law, and then the President actually signed a decree on that 17th of September. That actually a law, which has been signed by the President, is actually the most important one that everybody is supposed to actually accept it. But what I'm understanding is, and people, they don't constantly consider is, and why actually almost all these people are actually now fleeing from the country, and the people who wants to lead the country tomorrow are actually creating all this chaos, and at the same time calling the people not to stay into their homes and actually get away from their house. But if the President comes on Saturday and asks the Parliament again, immediately, actually, the Parliament will actually discuss and allow actually to re-establish and debate on it and re-establish actually the same law and make it go back to that actually 17th September, which actually used to be a political agreement between the federal member states of Somalia, all of them, during actually the summit in the Somalia 1, 2, 3, and 4 in Mogadishu. And that political agreement, they did not actually kept in their own way. They actually sent it to the Parliament. By the time they sent it to the Parliament, and the Parliament actually make it into law, and the President signs that into a decree with actually giving authority to the Somali people to use that decree. Do you think actually it will actually go back to again and again? No. So by the time the President comes there, he has to explain why actually he's coming back and what the reason why actually is actually to be changed. We know, all of us, because our country now is going to actually in a situation that we suppose, according to what my sister has been said now, we have to actually calm the people, and at the same time we have to actually the Parliament reinitiate again and replace that law into the previous law. So definitely, overwhelmingly, we'll accept actually to go back 17th September unconditionally.
Jihan, there are opposition forces who abandon positions in other parts of the country. These are frontline positions in some instances against al-shabbab in order to travel to Mogadishu and take up positions there. There are reports that al-shabbab has taken over at least one town as a result of this vacuum that has developed. So how much concern is there that al-shabbab will further exploit any security vacuum and make more gains going forward?
Yeah. I don't like to call them opposition forces, because at the end of the day, these are the Somali security forces that are allied. They're all Somali security forces, no matter which wing they are right now fighting against or the fraction between them. Yes, as you know, the Somali security forces were all trained, equipped to fight the enemy, that is al-shabbab. And the threat that al-shabbab poses is still there, and it's going to be there until the Somali security forces unite and combat against that threat. Yes, we know many forces have left the front operating bases, and that is going to have a long-term and a short-term impact, not only on security and holding towns, but also for the trust of the civilians that now the forces have vacated. Because always when you're fighting again in counterinsurgency, you need to win the hearts and minds of the civilians that you are there to protect. So vacating them in a situation like this right now, and it will hinder and challenge the future operations that our security forces would have. Right now, not only is the challenge combating Shabab, but right now we can see a broken chain of command. We can see, and as you know, any security force right now has to work on a chain of command. Once that is challenged, it brings an issue. Yesterday, we have seen an excellent step whereby the Prime Minister has summoned all senior security officers, and there was a meeting after an IED attack here in Mogadishu. So right now, I think the main priority should be for all Somali security forces to refocus and prioritize in combating the threat that al-shabbab pose.
Hodan, this is all fairly complicated. I want to look for a moment at the September 17th agreement that had been cobbled together and then later fell apart when it came to the elections. I mean, this had called for the election of federal lawmakers through indirect elections. It had been agreed to, but then it fell apart and the election was delayed because of disputes between the federal government and different states like Puntland and Jubaland, along with the opposition. What has to happen now for an agreement on how to conduct the elections going forward? Because even if the lower house of parliament agrees to this agreement again, that doesn't really solve the problem, does it?
It really doesn't. The fundamental problem right now is the lack of trust between the stakeholders. I mean, that's due to clear violations that we've seen over the past 6 to 8 months, starting. Obviously, the agreement was signed by the president and all the other stakeholders, but there were some challenges within how to implement that. And then that stemmed to this, total collapse of talks, followed by, attacks that were launched on political opposition that further, kind of really deteriorated the conditions. So fundamentally, right now, it's not about the process per se, it's how do we build trust among the different stakeholders, and what does that trust look like, and who needs to be a part of those discussions. Obviously, for the last 6 to 8 months, we've been having just the president and the FMS leaders having talks and then each telling us their side. We don't really know exactly what goes on in those discussions. As you are aware, the African Union has announced an envoy to be dispatched to Mogadishu to help facilitate the discussions and the election process. And I think that probably is the saving grace right now that the September 17 has, so that someone impartial can be in the middle and actually facilitate a dialogue and move the country towards an election.
Abdirahman, Hodan was just talking about the fact that the AU is going to be sending an envoy to try to facilitate dialogue. So let me ask you specifically about that. I know that President Farmaajo has called for dialogue to happen. Are we going to see dialogue? Are we going to see negotiations? Who, from your perspective, is going to be mediating in any potential negotiations that are going forward?
Mohammed, thank you. This is actually supposed to be a Somali-driven, Somali-led dialogue. And this is actually traditionally and culturally, we have been doing it for the actually last couple of years. I mean, if you see the Somali people, mostly they don't come and actually just talk. They always talk thoroughly and thoughtfully. According to what my sister is saying, that actually special level is going to come, will not actually sit down in between actually the federalist member states and the president of the Federal Republic. Maybe he will consult separately each one and actually consult and discuss with the concerned person that he wants to talk. But the Somalis will sit down together, will discuss about these issues. But I would like to actually remind everybody one thing which is very important. This political agreement, which has been made in actually Lusumrep, has been actually amended a couple of times. Actually, when it was first actually established by the Council of Ministries last year, and it was been brought to the parliament, we translated it into a law. And you remember, it was actually single constituency and closed list model of election. We rejected it, and actually that actually was proposed even by the president himself and his Council of Ministries. And then the president, by the time he has seen that the parliamentarians rejected it, agreed with them helpfully, and he signed the decree. By the time he did that, we went back to what we call actually the indirect election. And that actually what they have been working on it in the Somalia meeting, all the federal member states and the president and the prime minister, that was actually that time actually sitting with them. They agreed. By the time they agreed and come back here, the president brought it to the parliament, and we accepted, we agreed, and we made it a law. Mm-hmm. If you remember, that law is actually what we call the law number 30. It used to be law number 20, made by actually His Excellency President Hassan Sheikh Mohammed, but now actually we made it the same law, number 30. The same thing actually is happening. The dialogue actually will be continuing it, but still 17th September agreement. Actually, to me, mm-hmm. I don't know how it will work if we accept it, because some of them actually, they might actually insist saying something which is ridiculous.
Abdirahman,
which the parliament and the president.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. It's just that we're starting to run out of time, and I want to go over to Jihan and ask another question real quick. Jihan, given the level of distrust among politicians in Somalia now, which you had referred to earlier, what happens next? I mean, what has to happen for this political dispute to get resolved, and what happens if it does not get resolved?
I think first we wait for the president to meet the parliament. Right after that, we hope that, as Hodan said, and also Honorable Ibbi indicated, there has been always talks between the Somali leadership, and there is a red line between the two sides. And I hope this time the mediation, if it's going to be a Somali-led mediation or it's going to be supported by the IC or a special envoy coming in, there has to be a third party whereby there could be a real negotiations, mediation, and a dialogue and a political agreement. If that doesn't happen in the short term possible, the level of uncertainty is very high. The hope, there's a lot of hope that's being lost. Until now, people have not come back to their houses, and you can imagine the level of, the progress made, we are derailing from it. Meaning in terms of rebuilding our security forces, the financial reforms, the economical reforms, the overall reform process of the government.
Jihan, I'm sorry to interrupt you. We just have about a minute left. I do want to ask Hodan one last question. Hodan, you heard Jihan there talk about people that have been fleeing their homes, and you mentioned that earlier. We only have about a minute left. Let me ask you, how scared are civilians right now?
I think there was a sigh of relief by civilians, both in Mogadishu, but the global Somali diaspora. And we are very pleased that right now things are calm and tensions are low, but the potential for violence is very imminent unless we do find political agreements. But I just want to make a overall comment around what we need to do as Somalis. I mean, has to be a Somali-led process in terms of finding a political solution. But however, we need to understand that, in this age, Somalis are no longer interested in one-man rule or one-man show. And I think that has been clear in the last, particularly 1 week. There is a limit to, the silence and sort of, not reacting. And what you see in Mogadishu is citizens reacting against the inability to actually go to elections. We have, everyone's got a right to their views, but we don't have the right to create alternative facts. The facts are Somalia must hold elections every 4 years, and those elections have to be consensus and sort of everybody agreeing to the outcomes of that election. And we cannot risk any opportunities to go slide into the years of violence. So I think it's good, and I want to call on everyone to continue on the dialogue and to make sure that the citizens, not just in Mogadishu, all over Somalia and outside of Somalia, feel that they can live in peace and compete in the global world. That obviously there's many challenges. There's COVID. There's humanitarian crisis in Somalia. About 80% of the country is facing drought. So there are serious challenges that we cannot afford to have this political conundrum continue.
All right, we've run out of time, so we're going to have to leave the conversation there. Thank you so much to all of our guests, Abdirahman Ibbi, Hodan Ali, and Jihan Abdullahi Hassan. And thank you, too, for watching. You can see this and all of our previous programs again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Mohamed Jamjoom, and the whole team here, bye for now.